Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to my channel. This is Max from MBD Developments, and today I am very pleased to announce that I will be starting my course on how to build your own website from scratch. I am very excited about this course, and this will be the first episode in which I will just cover a few basic things and some basic HTML. So without further ado, let's get going. First things first, what will I need in order to do or to build my website? Okay, one of your main things is your browser. This is not so much your tool as such, this is more your viewing mechanism. Some people prefer Chrome, other people prefer Internet Explorer. I personally prefer Firefox, especially the Firefox Developers Edition, as this gives me access to a whole bunch of tools in order for me to use. Secondly, this is not essential, but I would strongly suggest you guys check it out and get into it, is to create your local web server. When it comes to HTML, it is not a big thing, but as soon as your website starts becoming anything dynamic, then you are definitely going to need it. I am not going to do a tutorial on local web servers. There is hundreds of tutorials out there. Just to name a few of the tools that you can have a look at is WAMP, XAMPP, MAMP, and there is a slew of others. So go to YouTube, check it out, learn how to install this. It is not very difficult, and then you will be set. Thirdly, probably one of the most important tools in your arsenal is your text editor or IDE. There is a whole bunch of them out there, all available for you to use. Some of them is free, some of them is paid for. Just a few that I'm going to show you, or actually that I'm going to mention: Notepad++, Brackets, Vim, Atom, Aptana Studio. These are all free. I personally use Aptana Studio. It gives me some nice code hinting, and it helps a lot, especially if you are a beginner. Some other tools out there is also paid tools, and of course the ever popular Adobe Dreamweaver. So if you do prefer to go the paid versions, Adobe Dreamweaver would definitely be the way to go. And just a final quick note on two resources. One is w3schools.com. It is an excellent reference for all things HTML, all things CSS, and a few other languages as well. So I suggest have a look at that. And then of course there is www.w3.org. This is the organization that maintains the web standard. So if anything you ever want to know, if the piece of code, whatever you are using, is web standard, that is a good resource to go to, have a look, browse around, and see. Okay, that is that for now. Let's dive directly into the HTML. Opening my chosen editor, you will notice that I have created an index.html file which is placed in my www folder in a subdirectory where I have access to it. If you do not have a www folder or do not know how to set it up, go back, have a look on how to set up a local web server. Diving right into the code. The first line of code that I would like to show you guys today is the comment line. The reason simply for this being, I've seen a lot of developers, a lot of tutorials out there start off diving into the code but hardly ever mention the comment line. And to me personally, this is one of the most important pieces of text. Reason for that being is that this enables you to comment your code. In other words, to leave yourself a little note on what you have done. Anything that you place between this and this will not be output by your browser, but you will be able to view it in the source code. This is Very helpful. This is very powerful. So when you come back in 6 months' time, you know what you did, or if somebody else works in your code, you know what they did. I know that I am nagging on this, but this is very, very important. I have seen so many times where people just simply do not use it, and it makes it extremely difficult to figure out what the person has done, especially once your website becomes more complex. The next 2 lines of code is the document type. Now the document type merely tells the browser what exactly it is dealing with. In this case, we are telling the browser that we are dealing with HTML4 transitional. You get different types, you get transitional, you get strict, you get HTML4, you get HTML5. I'm not going to go into that. You can pop onto the net, W3 Schools, go have a look there as well. They explain to you what each one of these document types are and how it functions and the purpose. The next tag will actually be our first tag and our first element that we will be working with, which is HTML. Now HTML, it's the opening tag telling the browser, I am now sending you HTML code. Please process this as HTML. And just to bring up a very important rule or a fundamental rule in development. In developing most software, you will come across this. There is rare exceptions to this, but as rule of thumb, whenever you open up a tag, doesn't matter what type of tag it is, be it an HTML tag, be it a header tag, a body tag, a div, whatever, it always needs to be closed. And how do we do that? That is very, very simple. As you can see, up to this point, I have only typed to HTML, and the reason why I haven't closed it is as soon as I do that, Aptana Studio will immediately close that tag for me. In other words, it will add a /HTML tag right there. That means I'm set, meaning I have opened the HTML, now I am closing the HTML. And let's do a save. Very, very important. Whenever you're working on any HTML, save, save, save. It's very easy to get into your coding, get deep in thought, forget to save, electricity goes down, we all know the story, and you lose a whole bunch of data. Another tip, keep your code clean. Keep your code neat, keep your code tabbed out. As I work along, you guys will see what I mean by that, but it is excruciatingly important. It's going to make it extremely difficult when you again come back, try to read your code, and you cannot see what is going on. Just as an addition to the HTML tag, in this case, I'm going to be adding another piece of code to that HTML tag. I do not want to go too deeply into the reasons why I'm adding this code, but I'm just going to give you guys an idea of the purpose of it. It is merely to extend the HTML and the XML usability. I personally have on very rare occasions used it or needed it. However, because it's good practice, even if I do know I'm not going to need it, I do still put it in, because you never know down the line where you might need it and you do not have it, and then it just becomes a hassle. So out of principle of good practice, always add that part, and then you know you are set there as well. Okay, so far so good. Let's start with our second tag that I want to introduce you guys today, and that is the head tag. Head. enter, and immediately, as with any other tag, it goes and it closes the tag for me. Now you would ask me, what is the purpose of that head tag? Well, the purpose of the head tag is simply this. The head tag contains all your metadata. Your metadata is information that you would like to send to the browser that does not necessarily get printed out, but is very important for the browser to know what it's dealing with, and it's got some other purposes as well. I'm not going to cover it too much. I'm going to add a few examples and a few things that I always find important, and that is a must within any head of any website. And this consists out of, let's start with the first one. The first one being a meta tag. Now, meta tags, again, something that you guys can go have a look on W3 Schools. It's very useful and it does a variety of things. The ones I'm adding here are very basics, and I will give an explanation to each one. So the first one that I've dropped in is HTTP equals content typed, the content being text HTMLs with a character set of UTF-8. Standard practice, all that it does, again, it tells your browser the content type, what I will be sending through. It's going to be text and it's going to be HTML, and it always needs to use the character set of UTF-8. Yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into that. You guys can read up on it, but this is standard practice. Always use this line of code in your header, and you know you will not have problems. The second and third meta tag that I will be dropping in is not essential for the working of the actual website. However, it is essential when you start looking at search engine optimization. The first one is a description. That's your meta description. This is a description of your website, or pretty much your page, your specific page that you're dealing with. A summary of it. What is this page about? It just makes it easier for Google to figure out where your page fits in the bigger scheme of things. Good practice, always put it in, and again, you know you cannot go wrong with it. The second one, very similar to the first, very much the same purpose. Slightly different, however. This merely deals with keywords. In other words, the most important words that's on that page. If your whole HTML page is going to deal with, let's say, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, then it's always a good idea to take your keywords and say HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or whatever the case may be. I am just going to put in content as explaining how to create an HTML page. Excellent. Again, we save. The next piece of code that I'm going to be putting in is not a meta tag, but considered very important. This is the title of your page. As you will notice, whenever you open up a website or browse a website, you will always notice at the top in the tab, it will normally say something like welcome, or whatever the page name may be. If it is a contact us page, it will normally state in the tab contact us. Now this is directly controlled by this title tag. If I change this, I'm just going to call this HTML test, and I will show you guys a little bit later where exactly that comes from and where that displays. Good. Now that is the most that I will be doing on the head tag. These are your essentials. Once you've got these in place, you know you are good to go. You've got your basic content type, you've got a description for your page, you've got your keywords for your page, and you've got your title for the page. Other things that will also go into your header tag will be things like links to your style sheets, that sort of thing. When you have got, for example, pieces of JavaScript, that will also go in there, pieces of Google Analytics, stuff like that, that will all go into your header tag. It does get processed, but it doesn't get output to your browser, and it just gives more information to your browser to understand what it's working with, what it's dealing with. That's great. So far, so good. We've got our head tag, we've opened up our head tag, we've placed in what we needed to, and we closed it. Next tag we will be dealing with is the body tag. Body tag. And as soon as I close it up, it will close up the tag for me as well. As I stated before, whenever you have opened up the tag, always make sure to close that tag. You will see even here in the title, I opened the tag, I closed the tag. You will, however, notice the slight difference with the meta tags, and those are one of the exceptions that I've spoken about earlier. But back to the body. The body tag is the tag that tells the browser that now it actually needs to print the information. In other words, it's received, it knows, the browser knows, it's dealing with an HTML4 page, it's got all the information, all the meta information from the header tag, and now it's going to come to the part where it's going to start to print the content. The way that we let our browser know is by simply telling it, this is my body, this is the content, this is the core of my site. And as with all good practices, let's comment it and tell it. This tells the browser that it's now dealing with the content it needs to display. And with the title, I will just be commenting that as well. I already did, so that's a good thing. See, comments, very important. Cool, we've got now the body setup, and now we are ready to create something that our page will display. So how do we do that? With the magic and almighty div. But before we get there, big question, what is a div? Well, a short description of a div is merely a div is a tag that separates your HTML page into various parts to work with, which is the core of pretty much any HTML page that you will be creating for displaying purposes. Going to mention a few things before we start working with divs. Number one is remember that a div can go inside a div. This is very important. I know to a lot of people it seems logic, it might come across as logic, but this is essential for being able to move things around and to structure your page the way that you want it. So a div can go into another div. And the second thing is that you can apply a name to your div in order to identify it. As you can understand, the logic behind that being that once your site starts getting bigger and things are starting to get more complex, you always want to be able to identify with what div you're working for, be it just in terms of having a look at it, or when it comes to styling it, it becomes very important. So let's have a look at that. How can I identify my div? Well, you have two types of ways to identify your div. One being by assigning it what is called a class, or by assigning it an ID. Now the two major differences, there is a couple of differences between the two, but the two major differences is that you will be dealing with and working the most with is that one, a class can be assigned to more than one div, or to more than one div tag, whereas an ID cannot. If you have assigned a name to an ID or to a div, it is it's you cannot change it, or you cannot apply it to other divs. So to start with a practical example, what are we going to do first? First, I am just going to create a div that's going to hold all my other divs. I normally use this as a background. That is what I use to change my background colors, etc. I know a lot of people do it directly in the body. I personally prefer to have another div that gives me finer control. So let me do my first div. I'm going to say div. We're going to assign it a class for this example. In other words, what do I want the browser and the rest of my website to know what this is called? And I'm going to call it frame. These names you can assign. Few suggestions: do not use spaces in these names. And keep it extremely short. Keep it short and keep it just as in a description. Like I'm going to do with mine, I'm going to call it frame. So I'm going to say div class equals quotations or double quotes and frame. Close it out, and it will automatically, in my Obtainer Studio, automatically creates the second div for me where it closes it out. If it doesn't do it for you, please do it manually. Remember, any tag that you open, you need to close. And there is my frame. As mentioned earlier, we can have frames, we can have divs within divs. So I have decided to make things very simple. I am only going to create 3 divs. I am going to create a header div in which I will place my logo for my HTML page. I will be creating a content div. This is where I will be displaying the actual content of the page, and I will create a footer div. And I'm going to assign each of them a class that I know what they are in the future. So first one up, I'm going to say div class equals header, and close out my div. And just as another quick reference that I can actually visually see on screen when I do have a look at this page and not in my comments, because I actually do want to see it on screen. I actually do want my browser to process it. So I'm going to type as this is where I will be placing my logo. Excellent. I'm going to create another div with a class of content. Close it up, and I'm just going to type in here, this is where I will be placing my content. And my third div being div space class equals footer, and close up. This is my footer area. Brilliant. And that brings us up to this point, and as always, the ever important save. So let's have a quick look at what I've done there, as I want to show you guys one more thing. First up, we've got our doc type. That's all set. Your HTML opening, closing. We have the head with everything in between there, all processed properly. The body, that's the area that will be printed and displayed on screen. And we have several divs. This is the frame that I use as overall created. Within that frame, we have created a header div, a content div, and a footer div. Essentially breaking our web page into 3 different sections. Just as an example, in the footer, I am going to add another div. As a matter of fact, I'm going to add another 2 divs. However, the difference here is I'm not going to assign a class to them, but I will be assigning an ID to them, just that you guys can practically see how that is done. It is, as a matter of fact, it is exactly the same as assigning a class. The only difference is we will be changing class to ID, and we'll give it an ID of, let's say, footer left. And as I've mentioned before, whatever you call your class or your ID, it's up to you, but keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Okay, inside I'm just going to say this is the left area of the footer, and below that div, as you will notice, we're still inside the footer div. It's still the div we are working in, so I'm just going to say div ID equals let's call that footer right. Close that up. This is the right footer area. Okay, my text is a bit different, but doesn't matter. And again, the reason why I'm typing it directly in between these divs is simply because I actually do want it to print out on screen. I do want to see it. Unlike my normal comments where I mark it out that it does not display. Good. Again, we save. And that is the first page of HTML. You have officially written your first page of HTML. Let's go have a look in the browser and see what this looks like. Open up my browser here. I'm already where I need to be. I hit enter and boom. You see exactly the text that I have typed out in each area. See, this is to say this is the footer area, and within the footer area we have the left div, the right div. Overall we've got the content. This is where we'll be placing the logo exactly as I have stated it here. There is where I'll be placing my logo, my content, footer area, inside, and point out something else. As I spoke about earlier about the title of your document, we go back to your browser, you will see it shows the title there. So another example, just gonna change this quickly to this is an HTML test page. You saved that. When you go back to your browser, you will see exactly that. this as an HTML test page. Now you're probably asking yourself the question, why does it look so bland? Why is nothing happening? Well, very simply because we are still short of a few basic tags for our content, and we are still short styling on our HTML page. That will be for a next lesson when I will start to look at some more tags specifically orientated towards styling, for the purpose of styling, and we'll also start getting into styling where we will be working with a couple of basic styles, different ways that styling is added, and a few best practices on that. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Your comments are welcome. Any advice that you guys also would like to give, or any opinions that you guys have, you're more than welcome to place them in the comments. And for the rest of it, guys, enjoy, and I will be doing my next video shortly.